Friends, I'm returning to the US-Iran confrontation. I had been quiet for a few weeks because not much had happened. But in the last 1 week, a spate of news has come, which makes a new video essential. But before I go ahead, kindly please like and subscribe to my channel. And if possible, make a comment. All of this pushes it up in the YouTube algorithm, and my videos then can reach a few more people. Friends, Trump is faced with a stark choice. He has painted himself into a corner, and once he returns from China, he'll have to make a decision. And there are only two choices possible. One is a renewed start of hostilities, but that has its own set of difficulties, which I'll explain. And the other is to make a very unpalatable deal because he has taken such maximalist Israeli and Zionist positions that even a slight deviation from that will look like a surrender. The problem for him is that the Iranians have decided not to surrender. They're not going to give up their control over the Hormuz. And if and when they open it, it will be with a toll that they badly need to collect in order for them to reconstruct the hundreds of billions of dollars of damage that the Israelis and the US have done by destroying the Iranian industrial base. Rightly or wrongly, the Iranians believe they have now the upper hand. In fact, there is a widespread belief in Iran that had they done this earlier, had they closed Hormuz earlier, many years ago, they would have never faced such severe sanctions, nor would have Israel and United States dared to attack them repeatedly. Trump is, of course, right now telling the Chinese to put pressure on the Iranians, but that might not work also, as I'll explain shortly. This means he will have to strike a deal allowing Iran to control Hormuz, with them charging toll and possibly removal of all sanctions. And both of these are much worse conditions than what Obama got. That is, when Obama was negotiating and the JCPO deal was struck by him, there were no tolls on the Strait of Hormuz. But yes, there were sanctions relief accompanying it. In addition, he will never get zero enrichment, the Iranians have decided. They will either do a short term, a few years of a moratorium on enrichment, or they will enrich at a much reduced level, like it was with Obama at about 3.5% enrichment. And this time, they're not even willing to ship all of their uranium, highly enriched uranium, which this time now is at 60%, unlike earlier when it used to be at around 20%. In Obama's time, I mean, when they had shipped this highly enriched uranium to Russia. Doesn't look like that is going to work out either this time. And they're also asking for Trump, that's the United States, to unfreeze Iranian assets held in foreign banks. If Trump doesn't want to do this, then he has to escalate. And the problems with escalation are many. Firstly, it's unpopular at home. The war is unpopular at home. So if he escalates, that's a problem. But if he waits, that's a problem too, because you keep getting closer to the midterm elections. Around 7th of November is only 6 months away. The second problem with escalation is the intelligence reports that have come out. Both in the Washington Post and the New York Times have spoken to American intelligence officials, including military intelligence officials. And they are saying, that is at least in the Washington Post, that about 75% of Iran's launchers, missile launchers, are intact. According to the New York Times, 70% of Iran's missile launchers are intact. And according to both newspapers or the intelligence officials they've spoken with, 70% of Iran's missiles are also intact. In fact, according to the New York Times, they have managed to dig out many of the missiles that had been buried, and those which were near completion when the attacks began have now been completed. Iran has also been able to access 90% of its underground missile sites because the US had not completely destroyed them. The US made a critical decision, that is, American generals made a decision that they did not have enough bunker busters to destroy all of the hardened sites. So what they did was they just destroyed the entrance to those underground sites. Iran has managed to dig out about 90% of those entrances. The US wanted to keep some bunker busters for any future conflict with North Korea or with China or with Taiwan. In fact, the New York Times is reporting that out of the 33 missile sites around Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has managed to restore 30 of them. That is, 90% of those missile sites have been restored. Those missile sites have cruise missiles which can attack ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. The other underground bunkers have long-range ballistic missiles which can attack countries. In fact, other intelligence published by newspapers, including New York Times, Axios, etc., show that those strikes were quite successful. In fact, they struck 18 US bases in over 7 countries during the conflict. and caused billions of dollars in damage to the US and killed 13 US servicemen, including in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia, etc. Moreover, there is an additional problem with the US arsenal. That is, the US has consumed up to half of its stealth cruise missiles. It has consumed over a third of its Tomahawk cruise missiles. And it has consumed between a third to half of its Patriot missile defenders. All of this depletion will take years to replenish. American factories, weapons factories will take years to make these missiles again. That means the US is in a weakened position with respect to China, North Korea, even with respect to Russia. Moreover, Trump is in another problem. Most of these weapons, the aircraft, the missiles, the ships, etc., require rare earth mineral, on which China has a monopoly. In fact, it was due to China exercising that monopoly last year that Trump had to curtail his trade war. China basically brought Trump to his knees by curtailing those rare earth minerals, which are required not just for weapons, but also for industries, for cars, for electronics. Trump did not want to see American factories, car factories, electronic factories shuttered. So not only will it take a lot of time, but also precious rare earths to replenish that missile arsenal. And if Trump relaunches a war and restarts this war, then there will be further depletion of this missile arsenal. He has been told this by his chief of defense staff, General Kane, and by other generals as well. But first, there's another development which is worrying for Trump and which will create difficulties in relaunching an attack, and that is Saudi Arabia. Recent information that has come out in American press, Axios, etc., New York Times, is that Saudi Arabia did attack Iran during this war. It was a secret. And towards the last week of March, Saudi Arabia also launched retaliatory strikes on Iran. But the two countries quickly came to an agreement where Saudi Arabia said that they won't strike further if Iran doesn't strike again, and Iran promised not to. And the number of missiles hitting Saudi Arabia significantly came down in the first week of April. Those few missiles and drones that did strike Saudi Arabia actually came from Iraq, because maybe the message didn't get through to the Iranian proxies there. And Saudi Arabia, after that, has encouraged Pakistan to conduct mediation between the US and Iran because it doesn't want to see further hostilities. It feels enough damage has been done to it and the other GCC countries. Moreover, as I've told you in the past, almost half of Saudi oil supplies are now being pumped from Saudi Arabia's eastern coast to its western ports in Yanbu, etc., on the Red Sea, from where it is exported because the Houthis are not interfering with the Red Sea. And this could have only happened with Iran's agreement, because if Iran gives a signal, then the Houthis will close the Red Sea again. So Saudi Arabia is better off than the other GCC countries, which are barely able to export. Most of them have almost zero exports. UAE is able to do a little bit from its Fujairah port, which is on the Arabian Sea and not on the Persian Gulf. So Saudi Arabia does not want to endanger half of its exports, which are still functioning, which help to pay the Saudi budget. This is in contrast to the UAE, which reports are now showing, including in Reuters, Wall Street Journal, etc., that is, the UAE attacked Iran's Levan island. It attacked a refinery on that island in the first week of April, just when the ceasefire was about to take effect around April 7th or so. And the UAE is not in favor of peace. It wants Iran to be eliminated, no matter what the cost, according to them. But the interesting development that is being reported by several news outlets is that the UAE has a team of Israeli soldiers on its soil, and these soldiers are operating the Iron Dome. That is, the Iron Dome missile defense system was operating during this war due to the agreement between the UAE and Israel. But the latest news is even more interesting. Prime Minister Netanyahu's office has revealed that Netanyahu visited the UAE during this conflict. This has been furiously denied by the UAE. Of course, they have a reason to deny it because Israel is not popular in the Arab world and even among the UAE's own Arab population. So the question then arises, why is Netanyahu and the Israelis revealing it? Well, it's because Netanyahu needs a win at home. Elections are approaching in Israel also. in a few months. And he has tried repeatedly over the last several years to make an official trip to UAE, which UAE has denied, because once the Abraham Accords were signed between the two countries, he wanted to tout this as a success back home. And I know that this is very popular in Israel because I have visited Israel in April of 2023 when I told the Israelis that these Abraham Accords will not lead to anything and they will never get an Abraham Accord with Saudi Arabia without settling the Palestinian question, the Gaza question. But they kept telling me, like eager, brainwashed agents, that Saudi Arabia hates the Palestinians, UAE hates the Palestinians, they are willing to sign any day, and that we don't need to settle the Palestinian Gaza question. We can keep building settlements there. We don't need to settle it. We'll get peace with the Arab world, free trade with them, investments from them, and travel and tourism, etc. They were very happy that they were visiting Dubai and Abu Dhabi because they thought this was unthinkable even a few years ago. But I was telling them that if any Arab leader from a large country or from a democratic country did this, they would be in danger. In fact, Saudi Arabia is not even democratic, but Mohammed bin Salman had said that if I do this, I will get assassinated. And no democratic Muslim country has signed an Abraham Accord with Israel. That is neither Turkey, nor Malaysia, nor Indonesia, Pakistan, nor Bangladesh. Nobody is going to sign it because the Muslim populations are sympathetic to the plight of the Palestinians. But returning back to Saudi Arabia, they might prove to be an impediment to Trump restarting the war because when Trump, if you remember, had launched Operation Freedom, that is, US ships would not accompany oil tankers but would just guide them through. They would not provide security but would provide them guidance, that is, avoiding minefields, etc. That lasted exactly one day because once the Americans started doing that, immediately the Iranians started firing cruise missiles and speedboats at them. And in fact, they attacked a few tankers as well. Seeing that there could be a re escalation and a restart of the war, Saudi Arabians shut their airspace to American flights and did not allow the use of their bases for air operations. That is, Operation Freedom did not just require ships, but also air cover. So Saudis refused to provide Americans the permissions required for the air cover. And immediately Trump had to shut it down. He didn't give the reason, but the news reports have that was because the Saudis had shut it down. Because the Saudis, unlike the UAE or Israel, do not want to see a restart of the warfare. And that is why Saudi Arabia is supporting Pakistan in its efforts for mediation. So I doubt that the Saudis will again support a restart of the war by Trump. Now, in that, coming to China, well, China is still helping Iran. News reports are that China is providing weapons to Iran through third countries so that China will have plausible deniability. It's not clear whether those weapons have yet reached. Earlier, China did provide shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles. They can shoot down low-flying aircraft, but not stealth aircraft. These are called man-pads, and China had provided them earlier and possibly during the war as well. China is providing satellite intelligence, but most importantly, China is still buying Iranian oil. US, that is Trump, has reimposed very strict sanctions on anybody buying Iranian oil. But the Chinese government, Xi Jinping, has clearly told the Chinese oil companies to keep buying and not worry about the sanctions. We'll deal with them. So China is not willing to abandon Iran because Iran is quite useful in the sense that it ties down so many US troops, aircrafts, missiles, etc., which cannot then be used in East Asia against China or in order to defend Taiwan. And as you know, Russians are also helping Iran. They are providing them with intelligence, satellite intelligence, but also they're providing them with resources through the Caspian Sea. Because of the blockade the US has done of the Iranian coastline, they're able to provide certain food items, certain petrochemicals, certain weapons also. There are rumors that the Russians are providing drones. The other Central Asian countries are also allowing food stuff and other things to reach Iran from the north. So in the end, despite the hardships that Iran is facing, it can wait it out for many months, according to US intelligence. And during this time, oil will start spiking. In fact, oil is going to spike in a non-linear fashion within a few weeks from now. This will put additional political pressure on Trump, both from the US public in general as well as his own supporters, because when the price of oil has doubled, the poorer and middle-class Americans who voted for Trump are going to feel the pinch in their budgets and in their salaries. because it's not just oil that will go up, but prices of foodstuffs, other commodities, that is, inflation in general will spike up. Already, inflation has increased to 3.8% in the US. This is primarily due to the war. So, with the election timetable coming so close now, less than 6 months away, Trump is under intense pressure. He has to either launch a massive attack again in order to compel Iran, but I've told you the problems with that, or he has to sign a deal which he doesn't like. In both cases, his presidency is in danger because in both outcomes, the elections may go against him and he may lose both the houses of parliament in the United States, that is, the Senate and the House of Representatives, which means he may become a lame duck president because the Congress will start blocking most of his policy initiatives. The Iran war may prove to have been the stupidest and most costly mistake that Trump has made. So until next time, friends, keep watching, keep liking, keep commenting, and keep subscribing. In fact, tell me your opinion of whether this war will restart or not once Trump returns from his China trip. So until next time, goodbye.